I'm on a quest to review every Nintendo 64 game. Brace yourselves for another 90s platformer with Rayman 2, The Great Escape. The Nintendo 64 loves its 3D platformers. Good ones, bad ones, alright ones. I freaking love Banjo-Kazooie, but I loathe Glover. Mario 64 is excellent, but Donkey Kong 64 is bloated. I'm wary each time a Nintendo 64 era platformer falls into my possession. Will it be garbage or a banger? Last year, my wonderful friend Logan bought me Rayman 2, The Great Escape, complete in box as a Christmas gift. It still has the manual! Game manuals are so delicious. My history with Rayman is surprisingly limited. As a child born in 1995, Rayman seems like the kind of thing I would have loved as a kid. He's got that 90s aesthetic, you know, that sick 90s haircut. His overall design is radical, and his games are cartoony platformers, which are some of my favorites. But for some reason, as a kid, I hated Rayman. If I recall correctly, I felt he was trying to encroach on my beloved Mario. And that accusation is silly and even hypocritical since I have always liked Banjo-Kazooie more than Mario. It's probably because Rayman was on other systems than Nintendo, and I was a Nintendo defender throughout my childhood. I rarely touched the PlayStation, and I only got an Xbox when it was cool to play first-person shooters when I was in middle school. I guess child me had something against Ubisoft, which was astounding foresight on my part because fuck Ubisoft. But even then, I played Beyond Good and Evil and considered it one of my favorite games for years. And when I was a teenager, I became obsessed with Assassin's Creed. So what was my deal with this man? This Rayman? My first-hand exposure to Rayman was through Mario & Rabbids Sparks of Hope in the Rayman and the Phantom Show DLC, which was one of the best parts of the entire game. Ubisoft sucks as a company, but they know how to make some banger games. Mario plus Rabbids is proof of that. After beating the DLC in late 2023, I decided to play Rayman 2 whenever I was ready to jump back into the Rayman universe. That has led me here, where I played Rayman 2, The Great Escape, to completion. The bottom line of my review is that Rayman 2, The Great Escape is pretty damn good. Rayman 2 The Great Escape is the sequel to the hit 2D platformer that surprised the world in 1995, Rayman. In this sequel, Rayman followed the popular trend by transitioning to 3D. The game begins with pirates destroying the world, weakening Rayman's abilities. He and his friend Glowbox are captured and stowed away in the pirate ship's brig. They eventually escape and fall to the ground below. Rayman learns he must gather 4 legendary masks to become strong enough to take down the pirate's head honcho, Razorbeard. His entire quest revolves around going to multiple worlds, saving friends, and collecting masks before confronting the evil pirate. Before playing this, I wasn't aware of how plot-heavy this game would be. I expected a light plot with little dialogue, but I was mistaken. There are tons of characters and lots of writing with funny voice acting.
Stop! Now it's booty. Oh, now it's you!
But what about that game feel? How does that game feel? Let's take the game to therapy to find out how it feels. As previously mentioned, Nintendo 64 platformers are hit or miss, especially in the control department. 99% of Nintendo 64 games do not feel remarkably smooth to play. Even some of my favorite games, like Ocarina of Time, still have weird movement quirks due to their age. And movement is vital in 3D platformers, which is what Rayman 2 is. Rayman jumps, floats, and even swings across 3D environments. He can punch too, and even though Rayman punching is iconic, the actual mechanic of punching feels tacked on, and there are only a handful of enemy encounters per level. Unfortunately, the game does not escape the clunkiness of the times. It was made in 1999 and released on the Nintendo 64, so I fully expected jank. Star Fox 64 is probably the only Nintendo 64 game that still feels smooth while playing. And even then, I'm sure someone will say it's still clunky. Rayman's clunk is found in a few spots. There's an awkward camera, movement is rigid, and jumping can be wonky at times. However, this clunk didn't detract from its greatness. Adjusting and getting a feel for the game took me a bit. It took me a while to realize I could climb many more things than I thought I could. But after a few levels, everything clicked, and it was delightful. Of course, a few levels took me nearly an hour, and it took me about 6 hours to beat this game. So it comes down to the player judging how acceptable it is for a sixth of your playtime to be unenjoyable and clunky while adjusting. In my opinion, an hour is an acceptable amount of time, but I would never disagree with someone who said that was way too long of an adjustment period. The levels themselves were good, but nothing extraordinary. There were some exciting ones where Rayman is chased by a pirate ship, another one where he races against his magical friend Lee. I'm having a blast when the game kicks into action and forces the player to move quickly. I'm still having fun whenever it's simple world exploring, but it doesn't stand out as a must-play Nintendo 64 game during the slower moments. Fortunately, action sequences are frequent and kept me engaged for most of the playtime. The most unappealing part of this entire game for me was the bosses. To preface, I'm not a huge fan of bosses in platformers, 2D or 3D. There aren't many bosses I can think of where I had a life-changing experience in a platformer game. However, I can recall multiple levels in a platformer game that were life-changing. So with that in mind, I didn't enjoy the bosses in Rayman 2 very much. They were okay, but they felt they had overstayed their welcome after a few minutes. Or perhaps they don't overstay their welcome and I just suck at the game. It's very possible. I haven't even played this series before now. Who the fuck is Rayman? Where are my rabbids? However, I hope the final boss chokes on a cucumber because he's obnoxious. While exploring levels, there are two types of collectibles to gather: yellow lums and cages. Cages can be found throughout levels, hanging off trees or other tall objects, and Rayman has to break them to free teensies. Teensies are silly little guys who are funnier than rabbids. Yellow lums are small yellow orbs. 50 yellow lums are in each level, adding up to 1,000 in the entire game, or spoiler alert, 999 in the game. Yellow lums incentivize the player to explore levels or replay them to collect all yellow lums, because if 50 yellow lums are collected in a level, the bonus level is unlocked at the end. It's a nice treat, but the bonus level wasn't anything special or worth the trouble of finding every last lum in a level, in my opinion. Still, I look at the UI and see the numbers increase, and my brain goes, smile, happy, good, good. So, as shitty as they are, Ubisoft did their job. Rayman 2: The Great Escape is one of the hidden gems of the Nintendo 64 I wasn't aware of. Maybe it's because I have barely interacted with Rayman, but I didn't know how fantastic its early games were. Or at least this game was. I haven't played any of the others. But if they're remaking Rayman 1, I'll give it a shot. I'll play it. For now, this game was terrific. I'm so glad it was my first fully fledged Rayman game. If I were writing this review in 1999, I would sing this game's praises everywhere. I would pester all my friends about it, telling them to play it like I do with Metroid. I think this game would be a 9 out of 10 in 1999. As for today, the wonky camera, the stiff controls, and the adjustment period bring the game down quite a bit, but not enough for me to despise it. Today, 2024, Rayman 2: The Great Escape, I would give a 7.5 out of 10. It's still a stellar 3D platformer I would recommend to anyone who has a deep love for this era of gaming. It's a standout, and I wish I hadn't been so hateful towards Rayman as a kid so that I could have experienced this gem sooner. You know a game is good when someone regrets not playing it sooner. I sure wish there were more Rayman games on the Nintendo 64. What am I supposed to play next? What can follow up Rayman 2? Lego Racers?